While all believers in the God of the Bible are familiar with the precept of tithing, many do not recognize the fact that God commands 3 offerings to be given annually. But exactly when are those 3 times a year? Some who are aware of the edict take up offerings 7 or more times a year and say that it's a matter of seasons, but that does not align with the Scriptures. And God says it would be a sin. You need to know exactly when these 3 times each year occur and what God requires of those who believe in Him. To find out more, stay tuned. Greetings from Quest for Truth, a program dedicated to proclaiming the honest truth about many biblical and secular topics. Ladies and gentlemen, the Almighty God is a great King above all magistrates. He deserves more respect and honor than any other being in heaven or on the earth. If we were to approach His throne, it would be proper to come to Him with a gift. In fact, the Eternal commands His people to assemble in honor of Him 3 times a year and to present an offering. But do you know when these times are? Well, God did not leave it up to inference. He specified exactly when these 3 times a year occur. As stated in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 16, 3 times a year all your males shall appear before the Eternal your God in the place which He chooses, at the Feast of Unleavened Bread, at the Feast of Weeks, and at the Feast of Tabernacles. And they shall not appear before the Eternal empty-handed. Every man shall give as he is able, according to the blessing of the Eternal your God, which He has given you. These instructions are unambiguous. They clearly list 3 holy days in which offerings are to be given. Despite this, some organizations choose to pass around an offering basket every week. Others understand the commanded holy days and yet claim that we must give an offering 7 times a year. While it would not be wrong to willfully give an offering at most other times of the year, to say that God commands more than these 3 directly violates His strict warning, where He said, "Whatever I command you, be careful to observe it. You shall not add to it, nor take away from it." We must not violate God's clear instructions in which He says, 3 times a year, at the Feast of Unleavened Bread, at the Feast of Weeks, commonly known as Pentecost, and at the Feast of Tabernacles, we must appear before Him in worship, and we shall not come without an offering. And so God commanded all males who are of age to make an appearance at these 3 holy days. Many of you watching may not be aware of the annual holy days that believers are required to observe. God, in fact, commands everyone to observe the weekly Sabbath as well as 7 annual holy days that are listed in Leviticus 23 as well as in the book of Numbers, chapters 28 through 29. They are sanctified days of worship, given not just to the Jews. They are days for everyone, including all those who claim to be Christian. For more on the topic, we suggest reading our book titled The Magnificent Meaning of God's Holy Days. For this program, we are focusing solely on the offerings that must be given during 3 of these days. In spite of the clear instructions in Deuteronomy 16, some say the command means 3 seasons. They claim that all 7 of God's high holy days occur within the parameters of spring, summer, and fall. But that is not true. This becomes obvious when we consider what God does not say. When He gave us a list of the 3 times a year, there is no mention of the memorial of blowing of trumpets, the Day of Atonement, or the 8th day. If we simply take the command at face value, we see that there is no requirement to give an offering during those times. Why, then, do some teach we are required to give an offering on every annual holy day? Well, if we skip the many excuses and get right to the heart of the matter, we realize that many organizations teach more than 3 times a year because it is a matter of income. If only 3 offerings are taken up annually, the church will receive less money than if 7 offerings are given. That fact may be a reason why there was an inference of 3 seasons in the first place. And thousands have heard the notion of seasons preached from the pulpit. I've personally heard many ministers claim that the terms 3 times actually means 3 seasons. But to give some a benefit of doubt, the erroneous teaching may stem from a misunderstanding about the Hebrew word moed that is frequently translated as feast in the Bible when speaking of the annual holy days. Moed properly means an appointment, that is, a fixed time or season, specifically a festival, conventionally a year, by implication an assembly, technically the congregation, by extension the place of meeting, also a signal or sign, appointed time, place of solemn assembly. Because of the inference of season, there are several places in the Bible where translators chose to use the word season in place of moed when referring to certain holy days. For example, speaking of Passover, in Exodus 13 it says, "You shall therefore keep this ordinance in its season, moed, from year to year." Because moed has been translated as both feast and season, some may have thought that the word times in Deuteronomy 16:16 was referring to seasons, and they ignored the fact that the 3 times were listed. But the words 3 and times do not come from the Hebrew moed. They are the Hebrew shalosh payam, and they mean literally 3 occasions. And yet many chose to claim that all of the holy days fall within 3 seasons, leading to the notion that offerings should be given on every annual holy day. But the assumption is not only wrong, it is presumptuous. While the conclusion may seem plausible to some, further examination shows it to be incorrect for a number of reasons. The first and most obvious one is the fact that the 3 times a year are listed in the command. And Deuteronomy 16:16 is not the only place in the Bible where this command is stated. Consider an earlier account in the book of Exodus, where it says, "The feast of unleavened bread you shall keep. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, as I commanded you, and none shall appear before me empty-handed. And you shall observe the feast of weeks, of the first fruits of the wheat harvest, and the feast of ingathering at the year's end. 3 times in the year all your men shall appear before the Lord." In this parallel verse, God also said that there are 3 times when all men shall come with an offering. Obviously absent from the list is the Feast of Trumpets, Day of Atonement, and the 8th day. If they were to be included, God would have not used shalosh, the number 3. If this were not enough evidence, there is a third place where the command is given. In Exodus chapter 23, 3 times you shall keep a feast to me in the year. You shall keep the feast of unleavened bread. None shall appear before me empty. And the feast of harvest, which is another expression for the feast of weeks, and the feast of ingathering at the end of the year, when you have gathered in the fruit of your labors from the field. This feast is also known as the Feast of Tabernacles. And then he said, 3 times in the year all your males shall appear before the Lord God. So we see that there are 3 places in the Bible where the command is given, and all of them indicate that there are 3 times a year, and God gave us a list of the 3. None of the verses refer to divisions of the year that are characterized by a difference in temperature, precipitation, or vegetation. God was not talking about spring, summer, and fall. It clearly says that the commanded observances that include offerings are the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of Weeks, and the Feast of Tabernacles. Now that the times of required offerings are clear, one might wonder, how much are they supposed to give? Well, the amount is not stated, but it's dependent on our income. Some may offer thousands, others hundreds, and those who are unemployed may have a modest amount to give. Nonetheless, an offering is required. According to God, every man shall give as he is able, according to the blessing of the eternal your God, which he has given you. Determining the amount to give is up to the individual, but we are given guidelines. If we have been blessed, then we should give more. But the blessing from God does not have to be evaluated solely on salary, bonuses, or an inheritance. We could be blessed in a number of ways, including knowledge and health, not just wealth. These are things that every person must consider when evaluating what they are able to offer the great God of the universe who has given us everything, including life. To further understand the significance of these 3 times a year, it is helpful to know what those 3 holy days represent. God's holy days are prophetic of His plan of salvation. That is why He never indicated that they were no longer required to be kept. He said that they are to be kept forever, meaning without end. The Eternal's plan consists of 2 spiritual harvests of mankind. Now, the first of these began in the spring with Passover. That was the time that Christ was crucified and raised from the dead. What most do not realize is that Jesus ascended to heaven on the same day of the temple wave sheaf offering. That offering is called a first fruit offering, and Christ is called the first fruits of those who have died. The wave sheaf offering occurred shortly after Passover, and this fell within the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Inextricably connected to that sheaf was another offering made 50 days later on the Feast of Weeks, the second holy day that also occurs in the spring. As God commanded, "And you shall count for yourselves from the day after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths shall be completed. Count 50 days to the day after the 7th Sabbath. Then you shall offer a new grain offering to the Eternal. The priest shall wave them with the bread of the firstfruits as a wave offering before the Eternal." This second wave offering of the year consisted of loaves and was called bread of the firstfruits. That offering represents the next step in God's plan of salvation. It represents the first and better resurrection of the dead. As shown to the Apostle John in his prophetic vision, these were or will be redeemed from among men, being firstfruits to God and to the Lamb. And so there are 2 feasts when wave offerings were given by the priest, and they represent people being saved and raised from the dead. The last feast of the year is the Feast of Tabernacles, also called the Feast of Ingathering. That feast occurs in the fall and portrays a much larger harvest of humanity, people who will not be considered firstfruits. All of this is thoroughly discussed in our book, The Magnificent Meaning of God's Holy Days. The 2 holy days that occurred just before Tabernacles portray significant events in God's plan, but they are not among the 3 times a year, and they also do not occur in the summer, as some had said. All of the annual holy days fall within 2 seasons, spring and fall, not 3. This is a fascinating subject, and it's very important for all who desire to worship God in spirit and truth to understand. We need to practice exactly what God requires if we hope to be a part of His plan of salvation. Simply claiming to believe in Christ is not enough. There is more that is required of us. For this reason, Quest for Truth has produced an informative free booklet. The Eternal Church of God produces a variety of literature to help people understand the truth about many biblical topics. Today we are featuring the booklet titled 3 Times a Year. This booklet discusses everything mentioned in this program and much more. All of the literature we produce is offered as a free service in the public interest. There will be no undesired follow-up. You may visit our website at eternalcog.org to read or request any of our material, or stay tuned, and at the end of this program we will show you how to receive a free copy of 3 times a year. So far we've learned that there are 3 times a year when God requires people to present an offering. These 3 times are numbered in His annual holy days, and they include the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of Weeks, and the Feast of Tabernacles. These days do not fall into 3 seasons. Even if we included the other annual holy days, there are only 2 harvests of souls, and the holy days occur in the spring and fall. Some ministers admit this truth, but continue to say that more than 3 offerings are required. Some call it a church tradition. But no tradition of men is allowed to change the Word of God. God's Word says that there are 7 annual holy days, and Leviticus 23 is one of the places in the Bible where all of God's holy days are mentioned consecutively. Even though they are all described as being feasts of the eternal, they are not all characterized with the same Hebrew terms. There are, in fact, 2 Hebrew terms that are used when referring to God's holy days. Bible scholar Alfred Edersheim noted the difference between these 2 terms and wrote, "In Hebrew, 2 terms are employed. The one, moed, or appointed meeting, applied to all festive seasons, including Sabbaths and new moons. The other, chag, from a root which means to dance or to be joyous, apply exclusively to the 3 festivals." Moed can apply to all of God's days, including the weekly Sabbath. Chag is only used when referring to the pilgrimage feasts of unleavened bread, weeks, and tabernacles. It is at those times that God's people are required to present an offering. Temple priests were required to offer specific sacrifices at many other times of the year, but these were not presented by the common people. When we read the instructions in Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, we see that there are many offerings to be given only by temple priests. Therefore, we need to delineate when an offering applied to the common people and when it applied only to the priesthood. This is not difficult when rightly dividing the word of truth, and we don't have an agenda. Many of these details are explained in our booklet, but we can again consider what Edersheim studied, and he wrote, "The 3 festivals in which all the males were to appear before the Lord in His sanctuary, these 3 as marking the great festivals. The appointed festive offerings of the worshippers, which are not to be confounded with the public priestly sacrifices offered on these occasions in the name of the whole congregation." So it would be dishonest to try and apply the priestly offerings to the ones that everyone were to give. They are not the same. They cannot be connected to the 3 offerings a year. The required priestly offerings would be only a drop in the bucket when considering the scope of the offerings that would be given during the 3 pilgrimage feasts. Those attending would bring very much sheep, cattle, grain, produce, and money. It was a time of rejoicing, and the celebration included partaking of the very offerings that the people would bring. Why, notice what God said about these days. "You may not eat within your gates the tithe of your grain, or your new wine, or your oil, of the firstborn of your herd, or your flock, of any of your offerings which you vow, of your freewill offerings, or of the heave offering of your hand. But you must eat them before the Eternal your God, in the place which the Eternal your God chooses, you and your son and your daughter, your male servant and your female servant, and the Levite who is within your gates. And you shall rejoice before the Eternal your God in all to which you put your hands. Take heed to yourself that you do not forsake the Levite as long as you live in your land." Tithes and offerings are mentioned in this passage. They do not fall into the same category, but are both dedicated to God's service. First, tithes are to be given to the priesthood, But there was an additional tithe kept at home, considered to be a second or festival tithe. This was used for traveling to and in celebration of the 3 pilgrimage feasts. There were also offerings to be given during these 3 times a year, and the provisions are what God was talking about when He said that you must eat them before the eternal your God in the place which He chooses. The festival tithe is mentioned again in preceding verses. You shall truly tithe of all the increase of your grain that the field produces year by year, and you shall eat before the eternal your God in the place where He chooses to make His name abide. But if the journey is too long for you, so that you are not able to carry, or if the place where the eternal your God chooses to put His name is too far from you, when the eternal your God has blessed you, then you shall exchange it for money. Take the money in your hand and go to the place which the eternal your God chooses. And you shall spend that money for whatever your heart desires, for oxen or sheep, for wine or similar drink, for whatever your heart desires. You shall eat there before the eternal your God, and you shall rejoice, you and your household. The 3 pilgrimage feasts, chags, are times when the festival tithe is used. They are occasions in which God chooses the observance and the location. It is during those 3 times that offerings are required, and the offerings are to be given to ordained ministers of the church, who are to then share with everyone. Edersheim came to this same conclusion and wrote, Sacrifices offered on these occasions in the name of the whole congregation with which they connect the freewill offerings that each brought, as the Lord has blessed him, and which afterward were shared with the poor, the desolate, and the Levite in the joyous meal that followed the public services in the temple. It is not difficult to know exactly when 3 offerings are required and what they were to be used for. A little common sense dictate that the holy day offerings were not taken up more than 3 times each year. Consider that most offerings in ancient times would consist primarily of clean animals, of grain and produce. If such offerings were required to be given on both the first and last days of unleavened bread, where would the pilgrims house all of their animals and store all of their produce during the days in between? If someone had only 1 lamb to offer, and yet they were required to give an offering on both of the high days of the Feast of Tabernacles, would they have to cut the lamb in half and give 1 portion on the first day and then the second half on the last day? In the meantime, that severed animal would spoil and rot and make it an unfit offering to the great God. In addition, there is another point of enormous importance that many disregard when going along with the notion that offerings should be given 7 times a year. It's the Day of Atonement. The Day of Atonement is a unique observance, and it's kept as a 24-hour period of fasting. While food preparation is allowed on the other high days of the year, absolutely no work is to be done on the Day of Atonement. Notice what God said about those who do not fast and those who perform any manner of work on that unique holy day. Also, the 10th day of this 7th month shall be the Day of Atonement. It shall be a holy convocation for you. You shall afflict your souls, speaking of fasting, and you shall do no work on that same day. For any person who is not afflicted in soul on that same day shall be cut off from his people. And any person who does any work on that same day, that person I will destroy from among his people. You shall do no manner of work. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations. With this in mind, consider the offerings given throughout history. There were flocks of sheep and goats, herds of cattle, sacks of grain, baskets of produce, and many other items that would require a great deal of effort to bring to the temple. None of that kind of work was allowed on the Day of Atonement. Not only were celebrants not feasting on food and drink, the work necessary to bring flocks and herds or to haul sacks of grain and produce would make bringing an offering on that day a violation of the command and a great sin. Simply because some of the offerings were monetary, as nearly all offerings in our time consist of money, it makes no difference to God's command. You see, no offerings were given on the Day of Atonement then, and none should be given today, for it would be a great sin. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not an administrative decision. We are not allowed to decide for ourselves how we will apply God's commandments or not. Why, God expects us to give 3 offerings every year during the 3 annual holy days, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of Weeks, and the Feast of Tabernacles. And anyone who says that more than those 3 are required is either violating their own conscience or they err not knowing the Scriptures. This does not mean that we cannot give offerings at other times of the year. We can and should give offerings when we are able, such as when we get a raise or a bonus or an inheritance. Why, we can and should make offerings when funds are needed by the church. But we cannot use the Scriptures to say that we must give them on every holy day of the year. It is important that we try our best to worship God in spirit and truth. We must practice what God requires and not violate the Scriptures when it comes to 3 offerings a year. For this reason, Quest for Truth has produced an informative free booklet. The Eternal Church of God produces a variety of literature to help people understand the truth about many biblical topics. Today we are featuring the booklet titled 3 Times a Year. This booklet discusses everything mentioned in this program and much more, such as, are women and children required to give offerings? Common misconceptions about priestly duties, historical evidence outside of the Bible regarding 3 times a year, and the notion that some believe this is not an important issue. All of the literature we produce is offered as a free service in the public interest. There will be no undesired follow-up. You may visit our website at eternalcog.org to read or request this booklet, or stay tuned and in just a few moments we will show you how to receive a free copy of 3 Times a Year. Until next time, this is Terry Moore encouraging all of you to continue the quest for truth.